Oh, I don't know. I mean, I could have come off maybe a couple cemetery tombstones. Maybe the phone book.
Imagine this. New York City, 1986. Inside the bitter end, a small club in Greenwich Village. Smoke curls through the air, and the walls whisper with stories from music history. That night, Bob Dylan was supposed to do a surprise acoustic set. Just a few songs. Nothing big. But right before stepping on stage, someone handed him a small note. Just 3 words, a name. Dylan read it, frowned, turned around, and without saying a word, walked straight out the back door into the freezing night. He never said why. Not to the club, not to the fans, not even to the friend who invited him. But those close to him, they knew. That name, it still stung. Now at 83, after a lifetime of avoiding drama and ducking interviews, Dylan is opening up. Not out of spite, not to get attention, just to tell his truth. And the people on his list? They weren't just enemies. They were friends, collaborators, even legends. Eric Clapton, the polite backstabber. On the outside, Bob Dylan and Eric Clapton looked like kindred spirits. 2 guitar greats who helped reshape music. They'd shared stages, praised each other's work, and even played a few unforgettable sets together. Clapton once called Dylan the greatest poet in music. Dylan, in turn, respected Clapton's blues roots. But behind closed doors, things got complicated. In the late 70s, Dylan was diving into gospel and spiritual music, experimenting, changing. Clapton, during a night of drinks with a producer, supposedly said Dylan had lost it, that his creative spark was gone, and that the new king of poetic rock should be him. It wasn't said to Dylan directly, but it found its way back to him. Dylan didn't lash out. He didn't write a bitter song or do an angry interview. He just canceled a planned recording session without explanation. Quietly, but clearly, he cut Clapton off. To Dylan, Clapton's charm was just a cover. He saw him as smooth on the outside, but strategic underneath. For a man like Dylan, that kind of betrayal, especially from another songwriter, felt personal. It wasn't just about music. It was about trust. Joan Baez, the folk queen who called him out. In the early 1960s, Bob Dylan and Joan Baez were the king and queen of folk. They sang side by side at protests, marched together for civil rights, and inspired a generation. Their voices blended perfectly, on stage and off. They seemed unstoppable. They weren't just collaborators. They were partners. Emotionally, politically, musically. Their bond felt bigger than just a romance or a duet. It felt like a mission. But then Dylan changed. In 1965, he plugged in an electric guitar at the Newport Folk Festival. It shocked everyone. He moved away from protest songs and into something more personal, more surreal. It wasn't just about sound, it was a shift in spirit. Joan didn't take it well. To her, Dylan's new direction felt like a step back from the cause they had championed. She begged him to come back to folk, back to politics. She said he'd lost his focus, lost his purpose. In interviews, she made it clear. She thought Dylan was turning his back on the people who needed him most. But for Dylan, it wasn't about the crowd anymore. He wasn't writing for rallies. He was writing for himself. He never clapped back in public. He didn't trash her in the press or mock her on stage. But he made his feelings known in another way, by staying away. For over 40 years, he never shared a stage with her again. Never collaborated. Never reconnected. In private, when someone asked him about the rift, he just muttered, "She sang for the people. I was singing for myself." Lou Reed, the punk who crossed the line. Bob Dylan always respected artists who broke the rules, people who took chances, who didn't care what the world thought. He wasn't threatened by innovation. He admired it. But there was one thing Dylan couldn't stand, being mocked. Especially by someone who walked down a path he helped build. That's where Lou Reed came in. Lou Reed, the gritty frontman of the Velvet Underground, was known for pushing boundaries. He was bold, sarcastic, and fearless. But in 1974, he took a swing at Dylan in an interview that stung deep. Reed said Dylan's lyrics were all smoke and mirrors. He called him fake. Said he didn't care about Dylan's music, never had. Dylan didn't respond. No angry lyrics. No public feud. Just silence. But this wasn't the kind of silence that fades. This was the kind that erases. From that moment on, Lou Reed's name disappeared from Dylan's world. No mentions in interviews. No quiet nods in liner notes. Nothing. Then, in the early 90s, a Rolling Stone reporter brought up Lou Reed's name during an interview. Dylan paused, looked up from his cigarette, raised an eyebrow, and said one word. "Who?" And then he smiled. It wasn't a joke. It was his way of saying Reed didn't matter anymore. Dylan had wiped him out without ever raising his voice. And in Dylan's world, that kind of silence was louder than any insult. Frank Zappa, the one who made it personal. Frank Zappa wasn't known for playing nice. He was sharp, sarcastic, and never afraid to stir the pot. With his wild hair and biting humor, he built a career out of mocking everything, especially the people who took themselves too seriously. And for him, Bob Dylan was an easy target. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Zappa took shots at Dylan in interviews. He called Dylan's voice a mistake of nature. He laughed at his lyrics, saying they were just fake deep nonsense. He even mocked Dylan's fans, calling them blind followers who thought they were smarter than they really were. Most artists ignored Zappa's jabs. They knew he liked to provoke. But Dylan? He didn't forget. Years later, at a party in Laurel Canyon, a low-key hangout of poets, musicians, and old friends, Dylan and Zappa ended up in the same room. A mutual friend, hoping to ease the tension, tried to get them to shake hands. Dylan didn't move. The whole room felt it. Zappa just raised his drink, smirked, and said, "I hear silence is your best verse." Dylan didn't say a word. He just turned and left the party 10 minutes later. It might have seemed petty to some, but for Dylan, it wasn't about being teased. It was about being disrespected. Zappa didn't just criticize the art. He insulted the man behind it. And Dylan, who never cared for showy confrontations, responded the only way he knew how, by walking away. Forever. Leonard Cohen, the poet who got too close. Bob Dylan had real respect for Leonard Cohen. He once called him one of the greatest songwriters who ever lived, a rare compliment from a man who didn't hand out praise easily. Their music came from similar places, raw, poetic, deeply personal. But even admiration can turn into tension. Cohen's rise happened while Dylan was pulling back from the spotlight. After Dylan's 1966 motorcycle crash, he disappeared for a while. During that quiet, Cohen's deep voice and thoughtful lyrics started capturing the spotlight. Some say Dylan felt replaced, but the real crack came from something Cohen said in an interview in the early 70s. He didn't mean it as an insult. He was talking about growth, about how artists evolve. But in passing, he said Dylan's early songs were a bit juvenile compared to more mature poets. To most people, that wouldn't be a big deal. But to Dylan, it cut deep. He didn't attack Cohen for it. No dramatic response. No cold interviews. But the shift was there. Quiet. Permanent. When Cohen passed away years later, fans expected Dylan to give a moving tribute. Something poetic. Something fitting. Instead, Dylan offered just 3 short lines. No warmth. No emotion. Just words that felt hollow. That silence said more than any eulogy ever could. Dylan never forgot that comment. And he never really forgave it either. Michael Bloomfield, the guitarist who walked away. Michael Bloomfield wasn't just another session player. To Bob Dylan, he was a secret weapon. His wild, electric guitar riffs lit up Highway 61 Revisited and helped push Dylan's music into a new era. That album didn't just mark a new sound. It became a turning point in music history. And Bloomfield was right there in the middle of it. Their bond seemed unbreakable. But then he vanished. After Highway 61, Bloomfield started saying no. No to tours. No to more recording sessions. At first, people blamed his personal struggles, his drug use, his anxiety. But for Dylan, it felt deeper than that. It felt like betrayal. Dylan had trusted him at a crucial moment, when he was transforming, when he needed someone who got it. And Bloomfield bailed. No real explanation. Just silence. But that wasn't the worst part. Years later, Bloomfield gave interviews that changed the story. He made it sound like he had saved Dylan's career. Said he was the reason Dylan went electric. Claimed he was the one who gave Dylan his edge. That didn't just hurt, it enraged Dylan. What had once been a partnership, a shared spark, was now being rewritten as one man's solo triumph. Dylan never called him out by name, never exploded in public. But after that, he stopped praising Bloomfield, stopped mentioning him altogether. In Dylan's world, that kind of silence means the door is shut for good. This wasn't just a list of people Bob Dylan couldn't stand. These were deep cuts, wounds that never fully healed. These artists weren't strangers or enemies from afar. They were once allies. Some were friends. A few helped shape Dylan's sound, his career, even his soul. That's what makes these rifts hit harder. Every name on this list reflects a different chapter in Dylan's life. A reminder of who he trusted, who let him down, and who challenged the man behind the music. Some mocked him, some misunderstood him, and some simply walked away when he needed them most. At 83, Dylan isn't out to start fights. He's not chasing headlines or trying to stir up old drama. He's just speaking plainly, something he rarely ever does. And when he finally opens up, it's not with rage. It's with that cold, clear honesty only Bob Dylan can deliver. So now we ask you, which name surprised you most? Which feud do you think still lingers in Dylan's mind, unspoken but never forgotten? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love stories like this, about the real drama behind the legends, make sure to subscribe. Because behind every song, there's a story. And behind every legend, there's a list they'll never forget.